Today on Voice of the Valleys, Reform leader Nigel Farage pledges to defend British identity, quote-unquote, until his dying breath, despite seemingly not having much of a coherent idea of what British identity is or what a British person is. And the Reform silliness only worsens from there. Not only that, ladies and gentlemen, in Australia, political prisoners are treated worse than actual terrorists, and the mention on mainstream television news of the genocide against the indigenous peoples of Britain has caused some predictables to have quite predictable reactions. All that and more today on Voice of the Valleys. Why, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Voice of the Valleys yet again with your host, friendly neighbourhood far-right thug, always satirical unless he's not Mr. George Cresswell. And yes, I forgot to update the image on my Stinger transition, so we'll still be going with that today. I'm experimenting with the different logo style at the moment. Please let me know what you think down in the comments if you're watching this. I've put it up as my picture on X as well. I haven't updated Instagram yet, I don't think, so I'll be doing that as soon as possible. I think I've updated it on Rumble as well, though I might be wrong. But I have updated it on my YouTube profile, but I'm leaving the banner as the old one for now. So anyway, a couple updates before we get into main topics of today. Just note as it's recording, it's Wednesday, the 11th of March, 2026 at 5 to 1 right now. So if anything has changed by the time this episode goes out, just bear with it. That's when this episode is being recorded, okay? Another note. Very important news for you guys in the members blocks. Not only for you guys not in the members blocks, actually, as an important video just been released, a segment from my video on Animal Farm where we talked about one of the Soviet Union's very destructive vanity projects in the context of the story that we were talking about, their 227-kilometer-long mass grave known as the Ballamore Canal, in which if you took every person that died building it, the approximate measure of 25,000, and spaced them equidistant for the entire length of the canal, you'd have a dead body approximately every 9 meters. That's now been made available for the public. Go and watch that. But for you guys in the members areas, which I was getting on to, questions for next podcast guest, Sam Mellier. Yes, Sam Mellier is coming on the show next week. Next Tuesday, to be precise. So that's why questions need to be in 10 p.m. GMT on Monday, the 16th at the latest. Okay, so Sam Mellier will be on the show next week. Very much looking forward to sitting down with him, one of the UK's very own political prisoners that was released not too long ago, but I believe now his license conditions have actually fully, gone, so we're actually able to have a conversation with him coming up in the near future, coming up next week. He's been on Mark Collette. He's been on several spaces as far as I'm aware. Got a book coming out as well, so stay tuned for that. I think it's going to be a really, really interesting and useful conversation. So, getting into today, there's been a lot of stuff coming out of the Reform camp recently that we need to talk about. By the way, going full hood gang, lefty plant mode today. Apparently even from the godforsaken hellhole that is Merthyr Tydfil, but I'm actually not. Please do not inflict that, absolute brand of, forsaken by God on me. Where I come from is bad enough. The Reform camp have really been making seemingly several rods for their own backs, and we need to talk about it. We really, really need to talk about it, because obviously in the run-up to a very important election in Wales, we're coming up on May the 7th, general election coming up in the next few years, I think it's important that we get this one right. I don't think we got exactly much opportunity other than this, right? Seems that it was at a conference recently. Nigel Farage put this up on his X page, 10th of March 2026. Another thing which just came to my mind right now, ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching this, I don't know if the page would have been taken down or whatever, please go to my X page and check the post where I mentioned there was a person impersonating Josh Fernie on X. So please go and see if that account is still active, and please report it for impersonation. If it is the case, links and information will be down below. He said, "We will stand up and defend British identity as long as we have breath in our bodies." Now, this clip is about just over 3 minutes long. I'm not going to play all of it. It would be far too long for that. But this is the last minute or so where he seems to go on about the previous establishment that was in place, which is fair enough. No one really likes the Tories, certainly not on the left. Many people on the right certainly do not. right? They represent one of the biggest stains on Britain in terms of the betrayal of the political establishment against its people, right? And this now, however, with reform seemingly paving the way to just come in and become Tory 2.0, right? Literally taking on many of the Tory defectors who cause the problems that people in Britain are rightfully aggrieved over, one of which is the recent notion that they're going to now be abolishing jury trials, which I was very disappointed to see that my MP voted in favour of. There's going to be some things we need to talk about with regards to that a little bit later, though, with regards to reform. This is the clip of Nigel Farage. Let's play this, see what he has to say. Let's talk about it, in particular where he says, in the post, we're going to defend British identity while we still have breath in our bodies. But seemingly, if you don't have the memory of a goldfish, right, if you have a memory that's just a little bit longer than that, you will remember that there was something he said not so long ago about the Welsh people that was quite troubling. Here's that clip coming on screen for you now.
What about the government elected to reduce the numbers coming in? Of the last 3 million that came in under Boris Johnson, only 20% are working. The rest we'll be paying for the rest of our lives. We're not against people coming into Britain who integrate, who come into Britain, become part of our communities. But we are completely opposed to millions coming into Britain, many of whom will take over parts of our inner cities to the degree that will make them unrecognizable, and who, rather than accepting our culture, want to impose their culture and their religion upon us. And everybody else is gutless. So I want to be clear. If the Tories and Labour Party are too gutless to talk about it, we will talk about it. We will stand up and defend British identity and British culture, and we'll do it as long as we have breath in our bodies.
So, seems pretty good, right? Seems pretty good. He spoke very forcefully, very assertively. Nigel Farage, the one thing he certainly does have, he's able to speak very confidently and commandingly, seemingly when the situation demands it, right? I think that really only resonates a lot more when you know you're actually speaking to the people and not speaking from a perch above them where it comes across as arrogant, right? Just what you see a lot of the times when certain politicians who are maybe sort of in the underdog position can get away with a little bit more in terms of like verbal jabs and stuff like that because they're punching up, whereas it's the establishment politicians when they use maybe the same insults or sarcasm or whatever it is, it doesn't look the same, it doesn't feel the same, it just looks like snide and disgusting because you're punching down, right? Especially if you're in these establishment parties and whatever else. So seems to have a little bit of that about him. Seems to have like that little bit of leeway where he can sort of get away with things if he wanted to. But the establishment credentials of reform are showing more and more and more by the day. Sentiment, I think, is massively changing to the point where people realize what's at stake if they become a minority. And as such, it's not even so much about the case of whether people come here to integrate anymore. People's interest is, by the day, being more and more lost with assimilation and integration because of the prospect of being made a minority in Britain. That is a demographic event horizon on a black hole, which if you cross it, right, whereas you cross the event horizon on a literal black hole, you cannot escape because light can't escape. Once you cross that demographic event horizon, and the one tool which you have to resolve this without resorting to other means of conflict resolution, namely violent ones, right? If you think about it, political solutions like this, the vote is essentially calm, non-violent ways of resolving what is in many ways just a constant civil war that is going on in the political space, right? Once that's taken away from you, what are you going to do, right? There's not going to be such thing as diversity, equity, and inclusion for indigenous Brits with the way this is going. And that doesn't matter. This case of, it could be people who are the best people from all around the world, right? If you want Britain to remain British, it has to remain vastly majority British, right? Now, different people are going to have different criteria where you draw that line. For some people, it's going to be the case of only, 100% English people, true Anglo-Saxon heritage, live in England, whatever else, probably not going to be feasible, right? But for the most part, most people, I think, are going to settle around a supermajority of indigenous people to Britain, in Britain, and then that can be worked out as it goes, because obviously there's the case where those groups don't always get along, right? They don't always get along. The history of these isles and the people who've inhabited them and the indigenous peoples has been one of a lot of conflict and strife, right? People often forget that. British identity. What does that mean? Because Nigel Farage has said, especially with regards to being English, he's not going to draw that down ethnic lines. So by that then, someone's biology, someone's physiology and their genetic makeup, who they are at their very barest level, is not going to matter, right? So that you just had this nebulous set of quote-unquote British values, right, that really nobody, not 100% of people agree to, that people are very, very split on what these quote-unquote, these nebulous British values are. But as long as these people from wherever else it is in the world come here and they don't do very heinous things, right? Don't break the law in heinous ways and maybe pay their taxes, that makes them just as much of the indigenous people as people who can trace their lineage back, several hundred or thousands of years, right? Which is obviously nonsense. There are indigenous peoples to these isles, right? People who can trace their lineage back hundreds and thousands of years. And to say that somebody who just comes across on a plane, right, or comes across on a boat, whatever it is, legally or illegally, and if they come into this country and they abide by the country's laws and they pay taxes for 5 or 10 years, then that makes them the literal thing. But then you see they change the language a little bit. They say part of the English community. It's not a people. It's dehumanizing language, which then sets the precedent for the genocide that we're seeing in Britain, one which people are still clamoring to deny, which we'll move on to a little bit later. That's something, a sentiment that Nigel Farage has alluded to and said himself. So I'm not making that up, because it was Nigel Farage that said that about the Welsh people, right? Or rather, not the Welsh people, the Welsh community, right? Dehumanize them straight off the bat, which is, it needs to be addressed, right? It needs to absolutely be addressed, because the Welsh are not just a community, and Wales is not just an economic zone or an industrial zone or a zone of resources. They're a people. If you say then, if you remove their claim to indigeneity, if that's a word, or if you remove their claim of being indigenous to these lands, that is the first thing you do to set a precedent for ethnic cleansing in a way that you can very easily deny, and genocide in a way that you can easily deny. So what did Nigel Farage, if you remember, a good few months ago, this was posted not long ago, but the actual clip is from a good few months ago, I'm not exactly sure when, at another Wales Reform conference, this is what he had to say about the Welsh people and what is a Welsh person, how do you define it?
You say that you would like to give priority to people from Wales for housing. How would you define a Welsh person?
Well, it's a very fair question from your channel. We hadn't proposed the Welsh language test. No, look, it's got to be somebody who's lived and is settled in Wales, has paid taxes and obeyed the law. And if someone's done that for a 5 or 10 year period, then I think they've every right to say that they're fully part of the Welsh community.
You say...
So a non-answer. An absolute non-answer, because you can't say what a Welsh person is unless you make the ethnic distinction, which is what Reform want to get away from. They've actively said they want to get away from. And I get it. It's an uncomfortable subject. I get that. It's one in which you're going to upset a lot of people. But it's nonetheless, took a turn for the Mike Tyson there. It's nonetheless the truthful one, right? Much as you can, do a blood test or whatever it is, you can do a DNA test and see where your blood will take you back to. There's no way to fake that unless you literally get someone else's. That's irrelevant, whether you come here legally and you're nice and you speak the language or don't speak the language and you pay taxes and whatever else, right? There's plenty of people in Wales who don't work, who don't speak Welsh, and therefore don't pay taxes, right? But they're still Welsh. They're still Welsh. If you've done their, ancestry test tomorrow, it'll come back as at least a certain percentage coming from these isles. There might be certain other parts of the country, the tribes that make up the indigenous peoples of Britain. They might be slightly different little bits of percentages in there, right? But it's not going to trace back to the Middle East, or it's not going to trace back to Indonesia or China or Japan or any of these other places, right? So you can't actually answer this. And if you think about it, as I've mentioned before, it's the same logic whereby you could say that somebody who, has been using women's facilities for so long, has been dressing up in dresses for so long and wearing makeup for so long and all of these different things, presenting themselves as a part of the female community. Well, if they do that for so long, well, are we just going to call them female? It's really the same logic when you get down to the bedrock of it. And really you see in there that reform is one of the ways that they're really no different from the establishment, right? Any real mainstream, increasingly becoming more and more mainstream, with membership set to take over the Conservatives in the near future, if their estimates are to be believed, who actually note that the British people are distinct peoples, right? And just having a passport doesn't make you British and all of these things, or restore Britain. They're the only ones that aren't dehumanizing the native population in this way. I ask you this, ladies and gentlemen. This question came up recently in my brain. Would we call this person a Welsh person? Now, I'll get onto the story in a moment. I've tried to find out a few details about this, but for some reason, a lot of the details with regards to this, aside from this one case, have not been made public. I don't know why. I'm getting to why that's important in a moment. Think about who else would fit into the criteria of seemingly being Welsh, even if we're going to say that being born in Wales means that you're Welsh, right? If we're going to use, the examples that we've gone through and we debunked before, many people say, if you, it's a dog born in a stable, a horse, you know what I mean? And I've talked about before, even if you say, well, if it's born in Wales, it's going to be a Welsh dog, which is more of an ownership argument, right? Because, you have the unequal relationship here between humans and animals, and if you're going to apply that across to the fact that you would then own this foreign human that is born in your land, well, that's making a pro-slavery argument. We've been through that before. There's a case that came up recently which perfectly encapsulates not only how this whole thing falls apart, but the realities of where it can lead to, and the realities of seemingly where it more and more and more inevitably leads to. So there was a case that came up recently. This is from the Express. Pardon me. And it's from a case in Cardiff, if I'm not mistaken. Just going to double check, make sure that it is. Yes, Cardiff. It was prosecuted in Cardiff Crown Court. So this is a case from Cardiff involving a man, a 44-year-old man, called Braverman Osman. Right. Now, why is he important? Why is he important? Well, Braverman Osman is what you would call not a very good person. But I think this would astonish people all the more. I say all the time, when a public figure says something, how many people agree with it, interpret it? How many silent people do you have that will go and carry out the things, right? Like you had all of the politicians calling Charlie Kirk a fascist and a Nazi and all of these things. It wasn't any of them that went and carried out the assassination. No, it was their minions that they deliberately radicalized, right? The no-named nobody, right? That's just walking the street, that goes and gets his father's grandfather's rifle or whatever it was, carves etchings into the bullets and shoots him, right? It wasn't any of the politicians that were calling him a Nazi that done that, which is why when you hear these things, the main thing you've got to be careful of is the silent people, you know, the people who are just everyday people that hear that and then they go and act on it or agree with it or they're nodding in approval. You know what I mean? This guy, Braverman Osman, recently got jailed, I believe, after he yelled, "F your country," in court after asking schoolgirl for act. Now, I've tried to find out when this guy, he's on screen now, there he is. I've tried to find out when he came to this country. He's 44 years old. He's 44. I cannot find any record of where this guy, well, not where he's from, but when he came into the country. He has prior convictions, right? So I tried to find out where those prior convictions are from. Because if he had you know, let's just say he owns like a corner shop or something like that, I don't bloody know. Maybe that's stereotypical of me to say. Maybe that's, I don't know, insensitive or whatever. I don't really care. If he was residing in this country 5 to 10 years and paying tax, and up until this point anyway, the convictions, it seems, because I can't find any note of them, any public note of them, there's potential that they could have been, you know, scrubbed to aid in his rehabilitation or whatever, or spent, I believe is the term that they use. Where we say this guy is he part of the Welsh community? Was Axel Rudicabana part of the Welsh community and until he went up and done that heinous act in Southport? So this guy, Braverman Osman, screamed, "F your country," at the judge after during sentencing, exclaiming he wanted to return to Kenya, where he was born. Say, you know, at this point, he tried to get a 14-year-old to do a act on him, right, as we'll get onto later on in the article. Now, he tried to get a 14-year-old to do an act on him. I think one could very, very easily make the case that merely deporting him would be too kind. Osman approached a group of schoolgirls in a park in Cardiff, Wales on July 13th of last year. We're only hearing about this now. He told them he wanted to be their boyfriend, called them sweeties, asked the girls their age, and tried to hug one of them. The jury heard. The girls told the 44-year-old to leave them alone, but he ignored them and asked one of them to go to his home, saying he needed help. Cardiff Crown Court heard that one girl crossed the road from where she had been sitting, and Osman asked for her help. But when she got closer, the defendant asked her to perform oral sex on him, which left her feeling, quote, shocked and scared. The girl quickly returned to her friends, who immediately alerted the police. The defendant was later arrested and told an officer, quote, "I didn't touch anyone. They were talking to me, and I asked one of them for a blowjob," as I'm assuming that is the bit that's asterisked out. And that was it. That was it, guys. He just asked the 14-year-old for a blowjob, right? That's all he done. You know? He was later convicted of attempting to engage or incite a child to engage in sexual activity. In a victim personal statement, the girl said, "Since this incident, I feel weary of people and scared of people who look like him. I don't like going out on my own anymore. Rather understandably so. My social interactions have changed. I don't like going out on my own, and I don't feel safe. I don't go to the Roath Park area as I find it distressing." So these girls, you know, can't go out and socialize with their friends in a public place, you know, in a community that you'd hope would be safe for them to do so, right? And because you never know what's going to happen. Never know what's going to happen. There'd be people out there now chomping at the bit, seemingly, to call this girl a racist because she say, I feel weary of people and scared of people who look like him, probably accusing her of racial profiling. But at this point, like I've said before, pattern recognition is a survival skill. Pattern recognition is just a survival attribute. People are going to call it racist, so be it. It's your job not to care at this point, not to care about labels. It's not to care about the warning signs, right, that tell you danger ahead. If you don't look out for yourself, you don't look out for your children, no one will. It's on you. The government has shown that they won't. I now stay local to home as I feel safer this way. My mum has been concerned and worried for me, and she supported me. Following the incident, I am shocked and distressed a man can say things like this, leave me feeling worried and upset. Osman has been jailed for 2 years and subjected to a offender notification requirement for 10 years. The court heard he has previous convictions for offences including battery and robbery. Like I said, I don't know when these are from. They have not been made public for some reason. I've looked online, and apparently this is because it can help with their rehabilitation and whatever else to have spent convictions and stuff like that. And then that means that they keep things like duration of whatever time served, when it was, all of these things, right? They keep them heavily under wraps from how I'm aware. I don't know. I've tried to find more details of this to try and find out when he came into the country, right? So I have no idea. Appearing via video link from prison for sentencing, Osman told Judge Lucy Crowther, I want to go back to my country, your country. Seemingly his country, he was upset that he got, caught, imprisoned, and he was given 2 years, mind you. 2 years for trying to solicit sex from a 14-year-old. And after 10 years, if he remains in the country, there won't even be a record that he ever did this anymore. So by the time, say after 2 years, he'd be 46, 47. By the time he's about 56, 57, there won't even be a requirement that he has to notify anybody, whether it's like an employer or something like that, of sex offender status. This is just great. Let's become a nation of sanctuary and bring tens, hundreds, thousands more of these, shall we? It's just great, isn't it? But don't you dare, mind you, draw any kind of ethnic requirement and ethnic component, and observe any ethnic requirement and ethnic component for what it means to be Welsh or British. How evil of you. How evil of you for not wanting to be replaced in your own home. How very, very evil of you. And the optics of reform only getting worse. Only getting worse with things like this, which I had to call out. Many people have called out. This is the chairman, David Bull, in this instance, seemingly without any hint of irony, posted this video, which I'll play on screen, with the caption, "The Green Party is more interested in Gaza than Great Britain. Do not trust them with your vote." We'll get on to why this is hilarious in a moment, ladies and gentlemen, but here's what he had to say.
I want to be really, really clear about this. The Green Party is a major threat to British national security. The Green Party is a threat to community cohesion. And remember, the Green Party is more interested in Gaza than in Great Britain. Also, don't forget, the party is led by a man who doesn't believe in borders, who doesn't believe in British national security, and who doesn't believe in upholding the rule of law. Ladies and gentlemen, do not let Zach Polanski hypnotise you into voting Green. I want to be really, really...
Now, I really hate this, because in a few moments, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to have to give the Greens some credit. Credit that Reform missed out on. Not David in particular, but credit that dear leader Farage and Suella Braverman missed out on. either for incompetence or, again, a Freudian slip of their establishment credentials. We'll see in a moment when we discuss the jury trial verdict recently, ladies and gentlemen, which they voted to essentially abolish them for lower-level crimes to make it easier to prosecute and get people in prison for wrongthink. It's probably to treat them like Joel Davis, as we'll talk about in Australia later on in the show as well. The Green Party is more interested in Gaza than Great Britain. That could be said for a lot of different people. That could be said for a lot of different politicians all across the spectrum. Dare we say that some of them are more interested in other foreign countries as well? Because, in case you missed it, ladies and gentlemen, in case you haven't seen this, which I posted in response to this, we have all the talk about the war in Iran recently. That's one source, obviously. We have the non-stop going on about being a unflinching ally to Israel. Israel's our greatest ally, etc., etc., etc. And then you get images like this. And I'm not the only one that observed this as well, ladies and gentlemen. Remember we discussed on the show last time that Ty said about the RAF, the RAF, being deployed for the conflict in Iran on US and Israel's behalf. And he said that they would use them, i.e. Reform would use them, in whatever way they saw appropriate, i.e. the US and Israel. Give them full authority over our military, over our Air Force, in the context of the question the interviewer asked. You have Robert Jenrick. Obviously, he was one of the staunchest Zionists of the lot as well. See that you cannot go a few minutes in your feed nowadays whenever anything of however small or large magnitude seems to pop off in the Middle East, right? The white and blue are going up everywhere. And obviously the watermelon flag is going up as well. And I'm getting increasingly sick and tired of seeing both of them, right? Then, to further elaborate on this point, this was on Sky News recently, as of yesterday, and it was a senior Reform figure, according to Restore Britain, although they did not name her, which I would appreciate if they did, because I do not know who this lady is. Ruling out, or rather not ruling out, the possibility that we could see British boots on the ground in Iran. Which is, I think, pretty much nobody, or very few people at the very least, who actually have Britain's interests in mind are actually on board with. Earlier on in that speech, Nigel Farage went on about a nation that can't control his own borders is not a nation. Yet we are now having to control, not even control the borders, but it's not even a border dispute, right? Between Iran and Israel. Now we're going to have to put our soldiers on the ground again in another conflict in the Middle East when we have a very vivid memory of what happened last time. This is apparently the based opposition position, ladies and gentlemen. Restore Britain highlighting or corroborating that their position would be no British boots on the ground because they don't think it's in the British people's interests.
Do I want to see British troops on the ground? Ideally not. At this stage, but I do think we should be.
But not never.
You can't rule anything out. Look, it's too hostile. We don't know the direction it's going to go in. But should we be using more of our weapons, and should the dragon be there already? Most certainly. Yeah.
Look.
Do I want to see British?
So calling for an escalation. It would seem. I would be more concerned that now, apparently, we are going to potentially need the military at home. Because this broadcast, who Nick Soto put up a post from the US State Department highlighting something which is very, very concerning, not just for America, but for all Western countries who've now been roped into this and gotten themselves involved with this. Apparently, March the 9th, this was posted, so 2 days ago, the US reportedly intercepted encrypted conversations from the Iranian government meant to trigger sleeper cells across the West, including in the US. He then goes on to say, thanks to the Democrats, we have no clue how many of these sleeper cells are in the US, and Schumer is still keeping the DHS shut down. Saying the Democrats are the enemies of the people, I can understand why Nick and many others in America would have that point, because it was the Democrats that had the massive open border policy from 2020 to 2021 to 2020. You know, Biden's term, whenever it actually officially started, and you know, you have the Biden regime that kept the border open, allowed like 20 million plus illegals in. God knows how many of those were Iranians and terrorists and whatever else. And now it's kind of weird. I was listening to an interview with John Kiriakou recently, a rewatch of one, and he was explaining how in the run-up to 9/11, they intercepted a lot of these code words and stuff like that. There was code words being like, there's going to be this huge wedding, there's going to be this massive soccer match. When Kofor Black was is he the director or deputy director of the CIA? I can't remember which one it was, when John Kiriakou was working there before they put him in prison. It was in this meeting, and he came in and asked, look, if you have anything on Al-Qaeda in the Middle East, please let us know, because we're receiving all these encrypted transmissions. Can you imagine the trigger words that are potentially highlighting now that there's these sleeper cells all throughout the Western world? So that's all throughout Europe. Britain is obviously going to be one, but they're worried about putting boots on the ground in Iran, which is in theory only going to make this all the more dangerous for people living at home.
Meantime, an alarming report of threats outside Iran. ABC News reports Iran may be activating sleeper cells. Quote, the U.S. has intercepted encrypted communications believed to have originated in Iran that may serve as an operational trigger for sleeper assets outside the country. If true, further illustrating Secretary of State Marco Rubio's point, we are fighting a terrorist government.
The United States is currently engaged in an operation targeting the world's leading hostage taker, the world's leading sponsor of terrorism. They are trying to hold the world hostage. They are attacking their neighbors. They are attacking neighboring countries, their energy infrastructure, their civilian population. They're attacking embassies. This is a terrorist government. This is a terroristic regime. And we are seeing them conduct terrorism using nation-state elements, using weapons like missiles and one-way attack drones. And the objective of this mission is to destroy their ability to continue to do that.
So, regardless of what you think of the conflict, regardless of how you think that it's gone, Iran, I saw recently, had allegedly attacked a Thai vessel that tried to use the Strait of Hormuz. They took out the entire bottom part of it with missiles and whatever else. So, yeah, it seems that for all the talk of, again, maybe this conflict's over, maybe it's not, I don't know. That's the whole thing. We don't know how it's going to go. You do an attack of magnitude like this, you don't know how people are going to react, and a lot of the times you've seen that people who are parts of these regimes and leadership and whatever else, they are perfectly okay with dying, whether it's literally by the enemy hand or by their own, in pursuit of the cause, right? So again, I'm not saying the US doesn't know this enemy. Obviously, they were in conflict with various elements of them for decades, right? But you're dealing with when people like Mohammed Hijab say, we love death more than you love life, they mean it. So maybe that's, again, the whole reason why when you had the thing where they took out the Iranian nuclear sites, maybe then Israel blackmailed them into this war. We don't know. But the Iranian nuclear sites, maybe you can see why they would do that, right? Maybe that will make sense. But now when we have a regime change war, which is what it is, right? And I say somebody doesn't like the mullahs and whatever else, I'm not going to feel sorry for the mullahs and for the IRGC and the regime or anything like that. My sympathies are with the Iranian people. If they do genuinely want this, then, you know, it's on them to go and take it, right? You have many Iranians then calling for British to go and over there and fight it, and that's where we're going to disagree, because we have too many threats at home. Especially when we think of how many people have come across the border illegally, the hotels and military bases and HMOs, the people of all different backgrounds and whatever else are getting housed in. Who's to say this isn't going to be, you know, a school that's going to get attacked, or a hospital that's going to get attacked, or something like that, or one of our military, camps, like training camps on the mainland, or an embassy or something like that. How do you then de-escalate it, I suppose? This is the thing where I suppose now it's gotten to the point I don't see how they can... You've gone this far in, maybe now you do need to go and finish all of this off. You need to make sure there's no trace of this coming back, right? Because it does seem that a lot of people, even in Iran, do support the regime, as evidenced by this video. I'm going to play it on mute just because there's a lot of shouting, and the audio will probably be filtered out by the thing anyway. And this was apparently a gathering after the Ayatollah was murdered of people in support of the regime, and it's a rallying call, a rally demonstration of defiance, right? And these are just civilians, as far as I'm aware, right? These are just civilians, as far as I'm aware. So basically, the whole thing is that people who've been hawking for this war, right, need to be ready to bear the consequences, obviously, and need to be obviously willing to accept the responsibility if this comes back and certainly kills people on the homeland. Because we can apparently go and afford to do this. We can afford the time, effort, and resources to go and police affairs on behalf, seemingly, of a foreign nation thousands of miles away, right? But when it comes to dealing with the affairs on the homeland, all of a sudden there's all these problems, there's all these setbacks and whatever else. What are we doing here, folks? What are we doing here? And speaking of sending the military, it's one thing I wanted to bring up as well, because this clip embodies to me the whole problem with really all of the leftist initiatives nowadays, especially with regards to feminism and the whole notion of you need to push women into everything, right? And that there are no differences between men and women and all of this kind of stuff, especially when it comes to war, especially when it comes to these things, right? Because now you have the perfect personification of how Orwell describes the interior members of the party and the people who dwell in the ministries, right? Almost like beetle-bodied, disgusting insect-like men scuttling about the insides of the embassies, right? Who rely on others stronger and bigger than them to fulfill their objectives. And then if those bigger and stronger ones and more noble ones die, well, that's either going to be something which they don't even think about, or it's potentially going to be a good thing for them, right? These disgusting, I love the term you use, like beetle-like men that have no really capacity to defend themselves, right? Not incapable of any real violence and affecting change themselves. So they send people better than them to go and do it under the guise of being for their benefit. All the while, they let their homelands be ravaged. They let generations of their young girls be, and all of these things, right? As we saw with Britain. There's now in Germany saying that women will be drafted for these foreign wars to defend NATO territory. Germany's defense minister says he is no longer making a distinction between men and women. The only thing is with the women, the feminists and stuff like that, this should be exactly what you wanted. This should be exactly what you wanted. But again, the personification of the effect that I see feminism at the very least having on men and having on women, turning them into things that they were never ever meant to be, right? There were these roles in place for a reason, and it would have prevented, in a lot of ways, beetle-like men like Germany's defense minister from sending women to go and fight and die in these conflicts, where the other sides are going to be sending their very best men to the front lines. And, well, let's face it, it's just not going to end well. But here's that clip for you.
Ich glaube, wir müssen mit der jungen Generation auch darüber reden, dass wir sie brauchen zur Verteidigung unseres Landes und auch zur Verteidigung des NATO-Gebietes. Ich bin übrigens dafür, dass wir an der Stelle keinen Unterschied mehr zwischen Frauen und Männern machen. Das wollen wir allgemein nicht mehr in der Gesellschaft, und auch in diesen Fragen sollten wir keinen Unterschied mehr zwischen Frauen und Männern machen. Ich glaube, wir müssen mit der jungen...
So women, you've heard it. No, when the bombs start dropping and the mushroom clouds start going up, no putting on your pennies and trying to say, oh, I'll bake the cakes and I'll clean the kitchen and I'll make the sandwiches and whatever else. Nah, you're going to the front line. Be your boss babe self on the front line. It's what you wanted. Somehow I don't think that's actually what you wanted, but that's the whole thing with feminism just being an entire massive con right from the start. One that, sadly, many, many people, not just women, have fallen for. So, very, very sad, very, very dismaying to see. But until time comes where both men and women are willing to reassess these beliefs that have now become fundamental to them, almost like they have ingrained themselves into their psyche so much like religious beliefs through generations of propaganda, through generations of indoctrination, through generations of learning this shit, which is going to have to be unlearned, right? And it's only going to come with the readoption of the traditional norms that made our societies the great societies that they were. Potentially even the greatest society that's ever been seen in human history. It's not going to, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, right? It's a euphemism or a metaphor for the definition of insanity. It's that way for a reason. If you keep adding 2 plus 2, you shouldn't expect to get 6, right? Well, I suppose if you add another 2 on, you will get 6. So that's kind of a terrible analogy, but we'll do that back. If you add 2 and 2 together, you shouldn't expect to get 5. No matter how many times you add 2 and 2 together, you shouldn't expect to get 5. Right, and none of you who are better at maths than me go start doing the fancy things with brackets and, oh, here you go, here's how you add 2 and 2 together and get 5. You know what I mean. Shut up. Until people are willing to reassess those things which have become fundamental in their psyche, right, which comes with admitting that people were wrong on things, that a lot of the thought leaders of things like the feminist movement and everything like that, which you were grossly mistaught about anyway, right? I think of feminism as just empowering women and all of this stuff. No, they wanted to destroy the nuclear family. They praised women's choice, quote unquote, whilst many of the philosophers thinkers, I'll show you if I can find the philosophers thinkers, well done, Josh, the feminist thought leaders, I should say, the early feminist movement, put up a graphic somewhere up here with the quote on it, saying we actually need to take away women's choice because they should not be given the choice to stay at home because more women will take that choice, right? And as a result, we won't have the support needed for this psyop. So, well done, guys. You've been conned into this whole con of choice. Meanwhile, there's the people that wanted to give you that choice that said you should be deprived of certain choices. I think it might have been Simone de Beauvoir or something like that. I'll put it up on screen anyway. But yeah, the whole notion that feminism is about women's choice and women's liberation. It's not. It's just made you a different kind of slave. It's slaved you to like Mr. McGillicuddy in your office to 8, 10, 12 hours a day or whatever. And as a result, now any children that you have are going to be slaves to the state. And it made the man a slave as well, because now the place that he would have had as the head of the family has been replaced with the state, and there's no way that one man could ever have the resources and the power of the state. So as a result, you wonder why so many young men today are feeling so disillusioned, because they're in a place where they're up against an opposition which they could in no way surmount on their own. But maybe people are so keen under the guise of progression to want to go along with that. And it's no wonder then why society's falling apart. And there's more from this. as well, ladies and gentlemen. I know we got a little bit off track there because we're still on reform, by the way. We're still on reform. There's another thing which they seem to have gone back on, which Richard Tice ended up getting gloriously community noted. And that was on the notion of council tax. So this was an interview segment on ITV News. Restore Britain, again, posted this, said Britain needs hard decisions and brutal honesty, accusing Nigel Farage of what they called extraordinary cowardice in the face of accusations that reform would reduce or cut council tax, and walking those things back despite the fact it was all over their marketing and in their own words, and Community Notes gave them a right scalping for it. And here's that clip.
I never said we'd cut. I never said we'd cut.
Your leaflet said cut your taxes.
Well, which means don't charge the maximum of 4.99%.
Most people would think that would be cutting your taxes.
Never once in the country ever did I say we would cut council tax.
Was it a mistake to put it on your leaflet?
I never put it on my leaflets.
You did. It said reduce waste and cut your taxes. Those were the words.
Nothing with my name ever went on that.
That was on a Reform UK leaflet in Kent.
Nothing with my name ever went on that. But what it did say is we'd save money, and we are saving money.
So no such.
That is just an outright lie. That is just an outright lie, ladies and gentlemen. A series of them. So, just before we get on to the next part, this is multiple parts of the story. Here is one of the leaflets in question, which I'll bring up on screen for you in just a second. One of the leaflets in question, he said it didn't have his name on it, but it does indeed have his face plastered right on the centre of it. Well, bottom left-hand corner, actually. It says, Broken Britain by Labour and the Tories. All right, Broken Britain by Labour and the Tories. And as you can see there, I've got it cut off a little bit at the bottom. You'll see why. Britain needs reform. Freeze immigration and stop the boats. What's these two? Scrap net zero to cut your energy bills, reduce waste and cut your taxes. Nigel Farage seems to think cutting taxes means not charging as much as they could, which, last I checked, was still an increase, not a cut. Let's say the proposed increases were, say, 9%, and you only increased it by 3%. That's not a tax cut. That's still an increase. He accused Rupert Lowe of dementia, of not having all his mental faculties there. May we speculate there's something going on here, or Nigel Farage seemingly not understanding how basic percentages work? But it gets worse, ladies and gentlemen. It gets worse. First off, I'll play you this clip that somebody put in the comments. Seems to be a montage of all of the times he talked about cutting tax and all of these things. And then I'm going to show you the moment they were community noted, and it seems to be even worse than what Nigel Farage said in that clip about the tax rises, but we'll go over that in a moment.
Never once did I say we'd cut council tax.
You've got to cut taxes.
Cut taxes.
Lower taxes.
We will cut taxes. We can do better for council taxpayers. Never once in the campaign did I say we'd do that.
Warwickshire Reform Party leaflet said, we will cut your taxes. The Worcestershire Party leaflet said, we will reduce waste and cut your taxes. That sounds like promises to cut taxes to me.
We will cut taxes. We will cut taxes. I knew it would be impossible given how tough the finances were.
At the local level, which is where indeed local elections take place, the leaflet said, we will cut your taxes.
When I say something, I keep my word. Worcestershire's a total basket case. You know that. I know that. Never once.
When I say something, I keep my word, eh? Now, I don't know how much of that would have been cut out by the audio improvement software. So if you guys didn't hear the lovely little jovial music in the background that I was sort of having a little boogie along to, I do apologize. Right? When I say something, I keep my word. Gang inquiry. Gang inquiry, funded by Reform UK. Where is it? Council tax cuts, where are they? Oh, wait, no, he said that, we wouldn't raise them by that much. Which, Hector Drummond, where was it? He had a good like one-line take on this. Cutting taxes can mean not putting them up as much, and call him what a weasel. Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. But Richard Tice, then, in a clip which we won't play because it's a bit too long, but you'll find it down below because I quote posted it. So on my post, you'll find the actual post itself. Posted a clip 23 hours ago. Nigel Farage corrects the incorrect Beth Rigby on council taxes. I just want to pull this up on screen. Can we notice how seemingly, as another person online observed, that online right, the pesky online right again, in this video, that Nigel Farage seems to have gone back to his like coat, dye cap, and try and make him seem like this old gent kind of figure. Seeming taking one out of Rupert Lowe's book of how he done his video on the farm, kind of seeming to mimic the attire and stuff like that, try and maybe resonate with where he sees the voter base going. I think Reform are a lot more rattled by Restore than they let on. I think they're not doing a very good job of hiding it either, because of the attacks that they've leveled at Restore, stuff like that, which people can easily see are not true. So I put this up, and I hate the universe that means that, what's his name? Femi, whatever the his name is. But it was like being really stalkerish with, I think it was Lucy Connolly or another girl, random woman he recorded on the tube or the train, whatever else. Right, really weird guy, massive lefty, right? He got one over on Richard Tice and Reform because of this. Because this is where I actually got the screenshot from him. Because he put, seemingly in one image, 3 screenshots together, right, which I'll bring up on screen for you now, of Reform saying that they were going to cut council tax. And council tax specifically. So I'll bring it up on screen for you. This is the video. This is the post that I put up. First one on the left says, "Meet Stilian." How do you say his name? Stilian Petrov, our candidate for Lapworth and West Kenilworth. He's ready to fix his local area by cutting wasteful spending, lowering council tax, and ensuring proper funding for key public services. Richard Tice, September 1st, 2025. Scandalous overcharging and woeful performance. Don't miss our press conference at 11 a.m. today. I highlight billions of waste in our councils and Reform to cut council tax bills by £350 in public sector pensions. Crackdown as of 31st of August 2025. As I said in that post, you know, that's probably going to get clipped if anything. But the community note is the most glorious part, ladies and gentlemen, which I'll bring the articles up on screen for you now, because I had a look at some of them. That's actually where I got the election leaflet from that we looked at earlier. You'll see the community note under the post. It says, Reform-led councils have proposed increases in the realm of 4.99% to 9%. So again, Nigel Farage in that video, which in fact, I'll quickly just cut back over to it and see if I can find the relevant portion of it, because he said that, meaning we might not don't charge the maximum of 4.99%. Here you go, ladies and gentlemen, just in case anybody's amnesia is kicking in, here's what Nigel Farage said.
Leaflet said, cut your taxes.
Well, which means don't charge the maximum of 4.99%.
Most people would think that would be cutting your taxes.
Never once.
Don't charge the maximum of 4.99%. Well, on that BBC article, ladies and gentlemen, 7 English local authorities have been given permission by the government to increase their council tax by more than the 5% normally allowed to ease a challenging financial position, quote unquote. So I'll just bring this article up on screen. Just let me crop it a sec, ladies and gentlemen. So 7, 3 of which I believe were Reform, if I'm not mistaken. But one of them, indeed, Reform-controlled Worcester County Council, which, as you can see here, Reform-controlled Worcestershire County Council, Liberal Democrat-controlled Shropshire and North Somerset, which is run by the Lib Dem coalition, are likely to increase bills by 9%. So one of Reform's councils, mind you, are likely to increase its bill by double or near double, because he said 4.99%. Oh, we won't increase to 4.99%. No, you'll increase to 9% by the sounds of it. Bear in mind, if this article is to be believed, ladies and gentlemen, later on in the article, they say here, with the exception of Trafford, which is this one here, Trafford and Warrington, which are both Labour-controlled, they're going to increase it by 7.5%. They are the only one holding holding elections in May. The rest of them are not. Reform are increasing the council tax whilst also not holding an election, which is, if I'm not mistaken, one of the exact same things that they levelled at the Labour Party when a lot of Labour constituencies were first announcing, due to the likelihood of them not getting their seat or whatever, or due to the likelihood of actually getting some opposition and being removed because of how dissatisfied people are, that they said they weren't going to have elections. It's a really tyrannical move, and now Reform seem to be doing the same. You can see, with the exception of Trafford, none of these areas are holding an election in May. Whether it's because they cancelled or whether it's because their elections are later on, I don't know. Maybe that can be something somebody can fill in. I do not know. But it seems as though Reform are doing the exact same thing that they accused the establishment of doing. Oh, I wonder who made an entire nearly 2-hour video on a book called Animal Farm in the members area of Voice of the Valleys, talking about that exact thing. There was me, by the way. And that's why you should go over and go into the members area and have a look at that. So, really, really bad showing. Really, really bad showing here. And one of the things really going to get you on this one now, ladies and gentlemen, is you remember when Tice said that he doesn't care about the ethnic replacement of Britons because, I'm going to be long gone? Well, he may not even be safe after he's long gone. He may not even be safe after he's long gone if this article coming out of Remix News is to be believed, that migrants in Germany, I'm just trying to find seemingly where they're from, two Romanian nationals, a 16-year-old and a 23-year-old, were taken into custody and transported to a police station in the town of Geldern. Police said both suspects have ties to Monheim am Rhein. Why are they so... Well, they're not exactly important to this story, but why do I want to zero in on them? Because, the saga of this is not going to end after I'm dead. If it's not done anything about it, it's not going to end after Tice is dead. And people who are dead are potentially not even going to be safe, because 2 migrants got arrested in Germany after 151 graves desecrated in scrap metal theft. And I'm just going to move me over here out the way a little bit so you can see it all. There we go. Reposition myself just a little bit. So yeah, when I transition to this scene, it brings me in a lot compared to the preview. The theft follows another incident at a cemetery in January where a large bronze statue of a nurse was stolen using an angle grinder. Police in Western Germany have arrested 2 foreign suspects after 151 urn graves were damaged and looted at a cemetery in the city of Monheim am Rhein. I hope I'm saying that right, with stolen metal items later recovered during a vehicle stop near the Dutch border. According to a police statement, visitors to the Waldfriedhof Cemetery on, I'm not even going to bother trying to pronounce that, I think that's a Strasse, Niprather Strasse, I'm assuming, discovered a widespread damage on the morning of March the 7th. Numerous urn graves and casket graves have been broken open, apparently perpetrators searching for copper and bronze items. Officers responding to the scene confirmed that a total of 151 graves had been damaged. The cross-border policing unit operating between Germany and the Netherlands stopped the vehicle with a German license plate at the border, crossing into the nearby district of Viersen. During the inspection, officers discovered several urns and copper objects inside the car. 2 occupants inside the vehicle, a 16-year-old Romanian national and a 23-year-old Romanian national, were taken into custody and transported to a police station inside the town, or in the town of Geldern. Authorities confiscated the vehicle and seized the recovered items, and they've opened up criminal proceedings against the pair on suspicion of aggravated theft and disturbing the peace of the dead. Again, so they have no respect whatsoever. Why would you expect people to have the same reverence, the same respect for your dead that they would have for their own? It's just something you shouldn't expect, of certain cultures that are massively more respectful to customs and the culture of the places they go to than others, right? People that strike me as exceedingly respectful from the things that I've seen from them are the Japanese. right? There's one people who just seem exceedingly respectful. You know what I mean? A lot of the time, obviously, you have bad people in every culture and an ethnic group. Obviously, you have bad people, but for the most part, when they come over here and you see them like going to like Westminster or looking at the changing of the guard and whatever else, they are exceedingly respectful. They adhere to the boundaries. You see no end of people from other cultures and other groups that just have no respect whatsoever, right? Now, last bit before we move on to more important bits of other stories we've got to cover today. Ladies and gentlemen, it's taken us an hour or so to get here. I appreciate you bearing with me. Is the jury amendment that just got made. So MPs recently voted on a motion to assess whether jury trials were going to be permissible in certain instances. So if there's a crime that now is going to have less than 3 years, it will now just be decided by a judge alone, it seems. Obviously, it's a massive upending of hundreds of years of legal custom in the UK. Funnily enough, it's coming at a time where we've had less and less British people in the UK, more and more foreigners, and all of a sudden, alongside traitorous politicians of our own kind, a lot of them try to upend the legal traditions that we have in this country. But quite surprisingly, how many people, even of foreign descent, actually voted against this motion. So as you can imagine, ladies and gentlemen, every single person that voted aye in favour of the Courts and Tribunals Bill, it was termed, at its second reading, which was yesterday at 7 o'clock, about 10 past 7. All of the ayes in favour of the bill, right, were one party in particular, Labour, to be expected. There you have Labour noes making up 63. Then you have, that's the Liberal Democrats, sorry, Labour, you had 10, sorry. Liberal Democrats, you had 63. Conservatives, you had 104. So it passed its second reading. Now, we want to have a look at some of the members who voted aye. You can find them on here. So I'll just scroll slowly down. I'll scroll slowly down this list, and you can try and pause it to see if your MP is on there. This will be linked down below as well, so you can see all of the list of MPs. So I tell you what, I'll just grab this and do it nice and slow. So apologies about this, ladies and gentlemen, but this is important, so I want everybody to see if their MP was on there. I know I read out the list before, but it would have been way too long. Apologies if I'm going a little bit fast. My MP is on this list, which I was very, very disappointed to see, but I'm not exactly surprised. So all of them, Angela Rayner, no surprise. All of them Labour. Right, a lot of the people whom you would expect. Mike Tapp, no surprise. So there you go. You have this long list, all of them red, to upend a long-standing legal tradition in the UK. Now, when we look over at the members voting no, obviously you have Conservatives, you have the Green Party, which is where they need to be given their credit, in fairness. You have several members of the Labour Party as well. Apsana Begum, I was very surprised by. You have independents such as Adnan Hussein in this bit as well. Imran Hussein, these people, right? Seemingly you have people of foreign descent here that are more in favour of keeping British legal custom than many British people. Then you have obviously Sean Berry, Carla Denia, Hannah Spencer, who all voted in opposition to this bill. Now, Reform UK also did. Or at least elements of them did. When you go to this one, ladies and gentlemen, and you'll see Reform UK's, you got Zara Sultana on there as well. Jeremy Corbyn was also one who voted against it. Who do you notice is absent from this group, ladies and gentlemen? For those of you watching, not listening, for Reform, you have Lee Anderson, Robert Jenrick, Danny Kruger, Sarah Polchin, Andrew Rossendale, and Richard Tice. I noticed is distinctly 2 members missing. If we go to no vote recorded, which is no surprise where you'll find many of the SNP, I think some of them, you'll find more of the Green Party as well, right? You'll find some of the Plaid Cymru types in here, but oh, who do we see here? Nigel Farage and Suella Braverman. Care to explain, guys? Care to explain? Because this is not the first time we've seen this happen with Suella Braverman. I can't remember the bill that it was, but I remember there was a big story that broke because her and Robert Jenrick walked into the wrong room or walked into the wrong side and mysteriously voted against the rest of their party. I think it was it on the assisted dying bill? I think it might have been the assisted dying bill, if I can remember correctly. But now, on this bill, where they've now been, Nigel Farage and Suella Braverman in particular, have been outflanked on their support for one of the most important things in British society with regards to justice, right? Something which has biblical precedent as well, right? You think about how things were meant to be decided in times of antiquity, right? It was essentially be a jury of your peers, except back then it would have been 2 witnesses, I believe. You know, it couldn't just be an accusation and that was guilty. No, you had to have 2 witnesses, I believe. Or it might be 1. I can't remember exactly. But this whole thing where you need to have more than one person just outside of the accuser and the accused to find guilt, right? To make it plausible beyond a reasonable doubt has long-standing precedent. And the leader of the supposed base opposition, and a Tory defector who was a key part of the establishment that ruined the country, seemingly either could not be asked or were too incompetent to vote on it. When the Greens could, when Zara Sultana could, when Jeremy Corbyn could. When, even if you're going to vote in favour of it, at least vote it. They want us to vote for them. They can't even be asked, seemingly, or are not competent enough to vote to keep one of the most important parts of our judiciary alive. What gives? What gives, guys? Like I said, if it's incompetence, it just means that they can't be trusted. If it's malicious, if it's their establishment credentials coming through that they actually don't want it, but they just tried to get away with it and seem that, oh, we didn't vote no, right? Gives them that kind of plausible deniability. Well, that can be even worse. They're trying to be like this, almost like this chameleon, and doing a very bad job at it. Rupert, again, if you're wondering where Rupert Lowe stood, Rupert Lowe was right in there. If we go into the independent section, and you'll see, there he is. So he could do it. Muhammad Iqbal could do it. Jeremy Corbyn could do it. Diane Abbott could do it. Adnan Hussein could do it. Even, guys, even Ed Davey. Even Ed Davey, and this person here, who I thought was Richard Tyson drag for a moment. These guys all could do it. Either where were you, or how couldn't you? And why would we trust you with the opposition in this country with potentially, very likely, the last shot that we have left? If you can't even get something as fundamental as this right. I don't know what more I need to tell you, folks. I know I'm preaching to the converted here, obviously, but I don't know what more I really need to say. How many more signals do we need? The Reform are not who they say they are, and they exist purely as containment, and they are the real vote dividers. They are the real vote dividers, not Restore Britain. It's as simple as that. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not sure if you would have seen recently, there was that little teaser that dropped on X of what a digital ID app would look like for the UK, and the propaganda for it has come out in full. So moving away from Reform now, this is something that's obviously very salient and very dangerous in British society, digital ID. Starting off with a bit of the context. So GB News published this article, which, if it is to be believed, is very terrifying indeed. Digital ID buried digital ID clause lets police turn your photo into a mugshot for mass facial recognition database. So everything like that just reminds me of the Snowden leaks and the things that he exposed, right? The mass surveillance program just puts me straight in the mind of that, the Stellar Wind stuff. If you haven't read that, by the way, Snowden's book, Permanent Record, is a really, really good read. I'm going to go back and reread it soon as well. Like I said, I'm trying to stick on top of the books that I'm reading at the moment, one of which I'm reading for a members video, the other one I'm reading just because I want to get more to grips with how to think. So the two books I'm reading at the moment are Plato's Republic and Occult Feminism. One because Occult Feminism I want to do a video on. Plato's Republic is just one of those things I want to try and really bend my brain a little bit and think about things in a way that I'd never thought about them before. The first two sections of that book, which I've read at the moment, is just all about like justice and what justice is, what it is, and how you attribute justice. It made me realize what a complicated topic that really is. But also, I was talking about this with someone earlier, a little bit of a tangent, how conversations have changed in the modern day. How you look at a conversation, you look at the conversations between the characters in Plato's Republic. It's nothing like the conversations we have nowadays, where they can have heated discussions, but they still remain on topic. It's still with the end goal in mind. It's not just the same shouting of slurs and insults and just slogan domination. The Socratic method that comes through, where it's just question, answer, question, and then another question, and then another question, and then another question, expanding. And with each question, almost like that little bit of chisel, like chiseling in a rock, to try and get that little bit deeper, to find out where either the logic falls apart or where it, contradicts itself. It can be a real thing to try and bend your mind around, right? It's hard to do, but it's really good for intellectual exercise. So I would strongly recommend it. And it's great hearing them when they say, by Zeus, as well. It's kind of like the way we say, oh my God. Anyway, back on to digital ID. A clause in the digital ID consultation could allow police to access facial recognition and biometric data held by the government. The headline of this buried digital ID clause lets police turn your photo into a mugshot from mass facial recognition database. So like I said, you want to know about like the Stellar Wind stuff and the Snowden leaks, go and read his book, Permanent Record. Darren Jones, Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, held a conference on Tuesday afternoon to delve further into how Britain's digital ID age could look. The digitalisation of government processes will be more efficient, quote unquote, and cheaper to run, quote unquote. He said it'll be very, very costly to the people that end up being made homeless at the flick of a government switch, like they do in China, mind you. He said adding it must be, quote unquote, useful, secure, and for everyone. For everyone. Obviously, it's for one thing in particular. It's to monitor just a native British person and to institute a surveillance totalitarian state like they have in China. We know that's what it's for. But the proposal has been polarizing both inside and outside of the chamber. Some have questioned whether digital ID provides a gateway for police to turn ID photos into mugshots. In the consultation, it states there is a legal basis for police use of facial recognition, and that the government is currently reviewing legal framework for use of facial recognition in law enforcement. How would that apply to quote-unquote hate crimes? What about somebody that posts something online that could be deemed as hateful or offensive to whatever the government says is quote-unquote hateful or offensive at that moment in time? See where this is going, folks? You see how easy it would then be to, especially when it's linked to like social credit systems and stuff like that, to deprive you of your very livelihood, to send you to the place where there is no darkness. When asked about this, during the press conference, Mr. Jones aimed to reassure the public that digital ID will not be working in conjunction with the force. The digital ID system that we're building is not a mandatory ID that you need to have available to show the police or anybody else. So it's, so is it, mandatory or not? Because if it's mandatory and we all need to have it, we know the police are going to be given a back door. We already know that. There's no reason, even if you say that it's not going to happen, we know that you guys are not going to be true to your word anyway. So, is it a case of that means that digital ID itself is not going to be mandatory? Well, that seems to go against what we've been hearing from Westminster itself. So, the whole thing just needs to be rejected wholesale, ladies and gentlemen. I get it. It's not going to be as convenient. It's not going to be as easy, but it is going to be worth it. Much like keeping cash alive. If you wish to use it, you can, but you don't have to if you don't want to. Well, there we go. I guess we'll see what happens. So any concerns the public have about how this interfaces with law enforcement, please be reassured, that's not what this is about. This is about making customer services easy to access and use across the government. Until, obviously, you go over, say, your carbon allowance, and then you can't buy meat anymore. Or the government decides that, that's enough alcohol, or that's enough whatever it is for that day or for that week. Or we're going to reduce the chocolate ration from 30 grams to 20 grams and then pretend that we actually increased it to 20 grams like they do in 1984. The press conference, the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister claimed the proposed plans could save Britain tens of billions of pounds. There have been estimates already done by the government that if we're able to digitise lots of these customer services, we could save tens of billions of pounds every year. But what will it cost people? So people forget, what will it cost them in terms of their freedom? Again, if you're already a person that goes along with everything the government tells you to do and you're not a dissident, obviously that's not going to be of a concern to you. Not going to be of a concern to you. If you don't care that your children are going to be taken in by a predatory school system and indoctrinated into these ways of right think and wrong think and turn you into the thought police the moment you have a dissident thought later on in your life or you say something in your sleep that isn't politically correct. If you don't care about any of that, obviously you're not going to care. If you do, well, this matters a lot. Bernie, Artemis for Now, said on X, she put a lot of good things up, good examples up, which I'll put on screen for you now, because they come up with they tried to sell this in a way that really was frankly pathetic. And in fact, I'll play you the video first, or at least play you parts of it. It's from Darren Jones MP. He said, can you get your admin faster or done faster than you can make a cup of tea? Here's part of that video.
If I look at this example I've got here, you can see some of the tasks you're going to be able to do in the future. So I can open it here, I can see the time it takes to make a cup of tea. If I look at this example I've got here, you can see some of the tasks you're going to be able to do in the future. So I can open it here, I can see that my vehicle tax is due to be paid pretty soon. I'll be able to just go straight to pay now, see the amount, and pay using my phone. Pretty easy. I can also see that I've got eligibility for childcare funding. I can check what my local bin collections are based on what my council is telling me. And if today were polling day, for example, if you wanted to, you'd be able to go along and use this ID as opposed to using your passport if that's what you'd like to do. I can also then make sure that if I've got a new job to go to, I'll be able to share those details and make it very simple as my right to work check is being digitized from 2029. All in the time it takes for the kettle to be boiled. Now, the important point here is that digital ID is what makes this happen, because digital ID is how you will log in and prove who you are on the gov.uk app. It brings all of those services together onto your phone, and that's why it's different than
Anyone also getting the impression that they're going to save so much money by how many people they're going to put out of work at a time when many people are already struggling to find work as it is, at a time when more and more businesses are trying to scalp off the illegal migrant labor to save money in order to maximize their profits, right? Anyone else just watching this and feeling more and more disillusioned? Anybody else seeing this and being like, well, are you going to keep this massive governmental apparatus in place then? If so, what are we paying all these people that used to do the admin for? What are they going to do? Are they going to be out of work? Right? So it's effective if all you care is about convenience and just everything being as easy as it possibly can be. Right? But where does convenience turn into an avenue by which the government can take advantage of you? That's the question. Because, as I mentioned, Bernie put up a good few suggestions as well as to how this is going to be used, most likely. From, you can't fill up your car. Your permission is only on Wednesdays. You can't enroll your child in school. She hasn't had her vaccine. You can't book a flight until you pay a disrupted council tax bill. Again, massively going up. What happens again when you only have a limited amount of social credits as well, right? And you literally have no money left over to use on, say, a short-haul flight or holiday or whatever, all the while your politicians are jetting off all over the place on all their lovely holidays and they're living the high life, all the while you live like a slave, right? for all the talk of equality and all of these things, the class society that socialism and communism brings has never been more apparent than it is in the modern day. You can't book a flight, as I mentioned, until you pay a disputed council tax bill. You can't hire a car. You have a red flag because of a social media post. You can't buy alcohol. You've reached your recommended limit. You can't renew your passport until your outstanding parking fines are cleared. You can't enter the city centre today. Your traffic credits are exhausted, or your ULEZ credits are exhausted. You can't withdraw cash. Your account has been temporarily flagged for review. You can't access your bank account. Facial recognition verification failed, or you got debanked and the government just decided to steal all of your money like they did to Enoch Burke. You can't buy a train ticket. Your carbon travel allowance has been exceeded. You can't sell your house. Your property compliance certificate hasn't been updated. You can't even leave your city because all of a sudden your leaving permit has been rescinded or whatever, or the government's just decided to close the gates to everybody. Oh, God forbid there be a pandemic now. You can't access certain websites. Your digital well-being limit has been reached. You can't claim benefits. Your activity tracker shows insufficient job-seeking hours. You can't enter a stadium. Your social trust rating is below the event threshold. You can't purchase meat this week. You've reached your environmental consumption target. You can't open a business. Your digital compliance score is too low. You can't cross the border. Your travel profile has been flagged for unacceptable social media posts. You can't vote today. Identity authentication failed at digital check-in. Or they just change it afterwards anyway. Or, as they observed in America when the election came around, they would put Donald Trump in the box and they would autocorrect to Kamala, and they would have to then make sure that they got their printout of whatever the voter certificate was to prove who they voted for, because the voting machines mysteriously would change their vote on more than one occasion in a very repeatable fashion. Oh, there's that democracy manifest for you. Think about it. You can't even enjoy a succulent Chinese meal, right? Because your carbon credits or whatever it is have been exhausted. Digital ID will mean permissions-based life based on how well you comply to guidelines, exactly as scoped and planned. It's the perfect citizen control project or product. She's absolutely right. She's absolutely right. That's why digital ID must be rejected at all costs, why cashless society must be rejected at all costs, and cash must be kept alive if it's the last thing that we do. Or one of the last things that we do, anyway. So continue to reject digital ID, ladies and gentlemen, to continue to push for freedom. Certainly, at this moment in time, what is needed is an all-out offensive for freedom. If we don't do it, it'll be too late. Speaking of freedom, regardless of what you think of this guy, there's been a man that's been very, very cruelly denied it, seemingly for no good reason. And we avert our eyes over to our sister country in Australia, all the way over the other side of the world, and land down under, where women glow and men plunder, or where beers flow and men chunder. Nationalist political prisoner hit with new delay while in worse conditions than the Bondi terrors. That's an actual headline from a article, or an outlet as a noticer in 2026. We're talking about Joel Davis here, who was a member of what the article claims is the now defunct Nationalist Socialist Network, but I don't actually know if they are defunct, because we saw the clip not too long ago of them seemingly being very organised and fighting with a bunch of Antifas. And Thomas Sowell has been in another court as well on various charges. It seems as though they are still relatively together, the group, but apparently it's been disbanded. Either way, the conditions that Joel Davis is being kept in, whilst still awaiting trial, if I'm not mistaken, really need to be highlighted, because it shows that if you have the wrong political opinions in 21st century Western society, you can be liable to be treated in worse conditions deliberately than actual terrorists that go and commit terrorist acts and murder people, right? This is the multicultural societal project, ladies and gentlemen. For the wrong political views, wrong speech, and wrong think, you get treated worse than people who go out and mass murder people, either, say, for racially, religious, or both reasons, which was the case with the Bondi massacre. A Sydney magistrate has scolded prosecutors over the delayed case of nationalist political prisoner Joel Davis, who's pictured in this here. You can see the terrorist on the screen as well, who has been in solitary confinement in inhumane conditions for almost 5 months over a minor non-violent charge. Mr. Davis, 31, remains in isolation at the dilapidated and unsafe Long Bay Correctional Complex, where he continues to be regularly denied access to showers and exercise, is banned from receiving books, has only had one family visit, and has a restricted phone list due to being designated a national security threat. On a non-violent charge, mind you. I'm not exactly sure when he was brought in on this charge. He's been in prison for a long time. In solitary confinement for 5 months, right? I don't know if he was brought into the prison before that and then moved into solitary. I can't remember what the exact amount of time the UN, I believe it is, classifies as cruel and unusual punishment to keep people in solitary confinement. I'm pretty sure it's not as long as 5 months. But look at some of the conditions we'll see as this now. But for non-violent charge, you can be designated a national security threat. If you're an actual terrorist that mass murdered people, right, specifically Jews in this instance, in Bondi, you get treated better in the quote-unquote supermax than you do if you're a member or was a member of the Nationalist Socialist Network, who Joel Davis was a former member of. He's been repeatedly refused bail due to his political ideology since November 20th. Most recently, on January 15th, after being charged over a Telegram post where he allegedly asked his followers to rhetorically federal MP Allegra Spender, which, let's face it, that's absolutely horrible language. If that's true, you just shouldn't be speaking like that, really. But again, it's non-violent. It's non-violent. It's horrible language, and why you would want to invoke that kind of imagery and use that kind of sentiment, I don't know why. It's just such a stupid thing to say if it is true. But again, it's words. It's horrendous words, but it's words. In response to her calling him to be jailed over a police-approved rally. So again, she calls for him to be jailed, for his freedoms to be taken away, right? And in this case it was. He allegedly then makes this call to his followers to essentially go over and give her a lot of hassle, right? Using these words, which I wouldn't use, but again, no actual harm was done as far as I'm aware. It would be a bit different then if threats were being made, if people turned up to her house, if there was actually potentially intent to go and do it physically. That's different. That's different. There's nothing on the scale of, for example, the Bondi terror attack. Naveed Akram was responsible for that, one of them, who was temporarily housed in the same jail. But this is the kicker, ladies and gentlemen. The new South Wales prison watchdog has recommended it to be immediately closed, this prison, which Joel Davis is still being held in solitary with no books, and he had to wait months to get a Bible, but they gave this guy a Quran immediately. He has now been moved to the modern Goulburn Supermax prison, where his cell contains a shower. He is allowed into the cell's private yard to exercise for up to 7 hours a day and gets pre-approved family visits. You get better treatment if you're an actual terrorist than if you are a political dissident who said some horrible things. That's where we are in modern democracies. The alleged ISIS mass murderer who was planning his attack while police were arresting Mr. Davis just streets from where the massacre took place was given immediate access to a Quran and Muslim chaplain while locked in the same facility as Mr. Davis, while the Australian nationalist was not given a Bible until early January. On Monday, Akram was also granted non-publication order preventing the media from publishing the names, addresses and workplaces of his family members, while Mr. Davis's partner was harassed by reporters and photographed at home just days after giving birth. This is a terror regime. This is a terror regime, folks, and this is the regime as well that our MPs in Britain actually voted not to ban social media for under 16s, right? You make your argument whether social media is good or bad. Right, but it was quite clearly going to be done in a political fashion. They were following on from what they'd done in Australia. Australia wanted to ban social media for under 16s, everything except Blue Sky, which is the most radical left-wing social media app that there is. Right, pretty much. You saw the posts that they were making on Blue Sky and even all over X and stuff like that in the wake of Charlie Kirk's murder. Right, this just absolutely deranged app Blue Sky is, but they wanted to keep that open for teenagers. But X, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, no. Only Blue Sky, because they knew the effect it was going to have, and then they were going to be able to normalize this indoctrination into children's brains even more. It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. So this is his cell. This is a cell, what Joel Davis would be housed in looks like. So bars on the windows, a urinal there with what looks to be like a very thin air mattress kind of thing, very thin foam mattress on top of it, some kind of manhole in the bottom, and no shower, no nothing. And as we mentioned, he's regularly denied access to showers and also to exercise. So unless he's going to just start doing endless amounts of burpees, squats, lunges, wall sits, whatever else in the cell itself, you'd like to then maybe go and have a shower afterwards, right, to make sure you're clean and whatever else. You think of how much it's going to impact his health, right? It's meant to physically and mentally degrade you, right? That's what this is designed to do, weigh you down, right? The isolation is another component on top of that. This is an example of Joel Davis's cell and the kind of things that he's housed in. This is another example here, right? A holding yard with shower for remand prisoners at Long Bay. So it could, if he's denied regular access to showers, we could presume that this room isn't what his room looks like because he doesn't get access to the shower. Or maybe he has a shower in his room, but the water's regularly turned off, right? You have other things then. This facility looks like it's absolutely falling apart. This is an example, if I zoom in just a little bit more, of the terrorist cell. And as you can see there, on the right-hand side of the cell, there's a shower right there. I'll move my cursor onto the screen for you. There's a shower right there. A single cell at Goulburn Supermax with shower on the right side. This is via New South Wales Corrections. This is the exercise yard, which he gets access to. I'll zoom out just a little bit. Sorry, guys. There we go. That's the exercise yard that he gets access to for 7 hours a day. Mind you, 7 hours. Whereas Joel Davis regularly not even allowed outside to see the sun. To get a healthy, bare minimum dose of vitamin D to maintain his health. Right? As I said, it's designed to degrade you and torture you. And you can see that the halls are a lot much better. They're a lot more sanitary. Mr. Davis's matter was heard in Downing Centre local court for a charge certification on Wednesday, where the Crown prosecutor asked for a 6-week adjournment, earning him a rebuke from the magistrate Greg Grogan. You already got 4 weeks in February, and asked why the prosecution was not ready to proceed. Mr. Davis's defence counsel, appearing on behalf of Matthew Hopkins of Paladin Lawyers, told the court his client had a Supreme Court bail application on April 2nd and agreed to adjourn the charge certification hearing until April 10th. Mr. Davis did not appear. Notice the News understands Mr. Davis intends to fight every single charge using a carriage service to menace, harass, or offend, and the same court previously heard only 6.5% of the 2,000 convictions for that offence have resulted in a custodial sentence. Mr. Davis was initially denied bail by a different magistrate who cited an alleged risk of reoffending, his quote-unquote espoused ideology, then membership of the NSN, and participation in the protest against Jewish lobby influence in early November, resulting in him missing the birth of his first child. I'm thinking about it's just going to weigh on him as well. Especially when he knows he's locked in prison and his partner's identity and the knowledge that he now has a young son, or young child at the very least, is being exposed to the world. And there's many people that will want to do those harm. There's many people that would probably want to do harm to that child and do heinous things to her, knowing that there's no man around to defend her. Everything is going to be playing on this man's mind every single day, every single second in prison. And he's locked in a cell like an animal. Meanwhile, actual terrorists get better treatment. It's disgusting, no matter what you think of his ideology. The crimes that he has committed. This is disgusting. He then had multiple bail applications rejected by other magistrates who ruled that his circumstances had not changed enough to warrant a bail review, citing Mr. Davis's political beliefs as a factor due to the quote-unquote political climate in the wake of the Bondi attack. Yep. Radical Muslim terrorists attack a bunch of Jews and it's white people's fault. Yeah. That's where we are. The actual terrorist gets worse treatment than people saying words about groups that he believes are a threat to Australians' way of life and their government. Foreign lobby groups. Which, if you notice, is people who would be in support of Joel Davis. They don't just Jews, right? They see problems with both of the lobby groups, which many, many more people are seeing by the day. I'm certainly seeing some troubling things, some troubling trends, some to come up in just a moment. But just think, this is how you get treated. If you're a political dissident, ladies and gentlemen, this is a political prisoner right here who's guilty, been charged. He's not guilty, he's been charged with a non-violent crime, minor non-violent crime. He's doing 5 months in solitary. No regular showers, no regular exercise, no regular access to family visits or anything like that. Meanwhile, the foreign terrorist, the foreign Muslim terrorist that shot up a bunch of Jews, whom Joel Davis is being scapegoated for, and many others are being scapegoated for their political views and their political opinions, gets better treatment. A mass murderer gets better treatment than somebody with certain political views. That's your multicultural society for you. Multiculturalism needs to end, and the beneficiaries of it need to leave. It's that simple. But Australia are getting a lot of things wrong at the moment. This is a state that placed vulnerable foster children into care with a transgender serial killer. No, I'm not joking, ladies and gentlemen, at least if this reporting from GB News is to be believed. Of course, state ministers have apologised after the calamity was exposed by a member of the public. 2 vulnerable foster children were placed in the same household as a transgender convicted serial killer. A New South Wales government department was aware since December that the pair had been placed with the murderer, yet took no action until this week. A member of the public had contacted local radio station 2GB to report that a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old were living with a 79-year-old Regina Arthurell, formerly known as Reginald Arthurell. Kate Washington, New South Wales' Minister for Families and Communities, has now issued a major apology for the failure during an interview on the same station. Yeah, not going to cut it. Not going to cut it. You don't just put vulnerable children into the care, first off, of somebody who seemingly has a tenuous grasp on reality with the whole transgender thing, but then they also turn out to be a serial killer. Nah, there's no apologizing your way out of that. You need to go. You need to say, I'm not cut out for this line of work. I'm going to go find something else. I'm going to go put the fries in the bag or something. It should never have happened, and I'm deeply apologetic for what has happened. Ms. Washington described the situation as entirely unacceptable. You don't say. The triple killer began... Why is a triple killer out on the... just randomly... what's going on? Why are they not behind... Why is he not behind bars? What is he doing home? Triple killer began sharing a home with the foster children after being invited to stay by an elderly woman he met at Westmead Hospital. The woman's daughter then alerted police after growing concern for the safety of her mother and her children. This is the guy, by the way. This is the guy, Reginald. Good old Reginald here, triple serial killer. Who I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because of how absurd it is. Somebody in the New South Wales, what was her name? Friggin' Kate Washington, New South Wales' Minister for Families and Communities, looked at this, thought, yep, let's send vulnerable children there. Says, oh, I'm sorry. As we say, oh yeah, we're going to trust you with more things in your Minister of Family and Communities role. We're going to trust you with that role after you send 2 children to a triple serial killer transgender. Are you kidding me? On Tuesday, it revealed that armed police had raided the home and separated the killer from the others. The minister said she only learned of the matter in recent days, despite her department having been informed months earlier. Ooh, yeah, you're not getting your way out of this one. Like I said, you sent 2 children into the care of a person who quote unquote identifies as transgender and quite clearly has some serious mental problems. That's a strikeout anyway. The serial killer part just makes it even worse. The department was aware of the situation late December, and very poor decisions were made at that time, you do not say. Miss Washington confirmed that the Department of Communities and Justice had initiated a review into the incident. The review is going to go through the whole timeline. Just resign. Just resign. There's no coming back from this. Who knew what, when, and who made what decisions when? Arthur L. is no longer living with the children, thank God. And as she witnessed a failure of this magnitude before, Ms. Washington replied, "No, I haven't. I could not have been more shocked and horrified." He was convicted of murdering a former partner in 1995, having beaten her in the back of the head with a piece of wood. This is the partner, I believe, that he's accused of murdering. Oh, well, convicted of murdering. Prior to that killing, Arthur Rell had already received 2 manslaughter convictions. Following the expiry of parole in 2021, authorities imposed an extended supervision on the murderer with conditions, including electronic monitoring and alcohol rehabilitation. That year, it emerged he was leading a new life as a woman and allegedly made threats against his female victim's family. Yeah, he sounds rehabilitated. He sounds like somebody you let out on parole. Yeah, 2 manslaughter charges and a murder. Yeah, that's somebody that can be trusted in polite society. And then he comes out and saying, "Oh yeah, I'm a woman now." Sorry, this is arms by the sides in a canvas jacket, padded cell job. You know. He noted at the time that Arthur was in poor health and had made a sincere effort at rehabilitation. Yeah, he could do that from the inside of his padded cell. The judge warned that Arthur had unequivocally demonstrated a proclivity to violently terminate the lives of fellow human beings. Yep. So let's send 2 vulnerable foster children to this man. Frail, even physically disabled person can inflict fatal harm once armed with a weapon. Australia, man. You got some serious problems. How you haven't, you had that gun buyback a little while ago. How you didn't decide that this is the time to, maybe start Second Amendment in this shit, I have no idea. Your state, ministers within your state are literally sending vulnerable children without parents to transgender serial killers. Can it get much worse than that? Can it get much worse than that? But I forgot, I'm not supposed to say anything about that because, oh dear God, it could be deemed as transphobic. Oh dear God, wouldn't want to do that now, would we? So, absolutely, I'm thinking at this point, there's no reason for Joel Davis to be kept in the situation that he's in. Certainly if he's going to go on trial, I don't see any reason. As far as I'm aware, he's just been organized. He organized a few police-approved protests as part of his group, and he said that one thing allegedly in a Telegram group, allegedly, mind you, that was a very poor choice of words, but was not like a threat to her or anything like that. He does not deserve to be held in animalistic conditions because of that. Meanwhile, a literal terrorist gets better treatment than him. And for the Australians as a whole, liberate Australia. Liberate Australia and protect your children. The state's coming for them just like it is anywhere else. Last couple of things now, ladies and gentlemen. I know this episode has gone on quite long. So this is now... Oh no. Oh no, hang on. Oh, this is not good. Oh. Ah, right, okay. So you might have seen a slight cut there, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry, I know I'm a bit spaced out right now. You might have seen a slight cut there because my computer decided it was going to death screen and then miraculously came back on. So I'm very grateful right now that I don't appear to have lost anything. Yeah, I let out a good few expletives there, so good thing you did not hear that. So, I apologize about that. Last couple of stories, like I said. This now is really what could be considered a quite, iconic moment, really, I suppose. Certainly will go down in the history books and has led to much discussion, like many of the people we just talked about, part of the group, especially the Nationalist Socialist Network, Joel Davis, etc. We're thinking about the allegiances of certain groups of peoples that you're not supposed to in any way scrutinize or anything like that. There was a mention of a word which apparently you're not supposed to use with regards to the ethnic replacement and elimination of Britons from their homeland, the only land they have to call home, their indigenous homeland, that someone on GB News guessed, in this case a former advisor to Boris Johnson, Thomas Corbett Dillon, described what's been going on in the UK as a genocide, said that if this was going on anywhere else, it would be called a genocide. And certain people had certain things to say, and it warrants a fair bit of scrutiny, especially with regards to some of a really humiliating clip that really doesn't do their causes and themselves any favors for all the labels of anti-Semitism and bigotry and so on. So the guy said there is a genocide happening on this island because it's been taken over by different people that are not indigenous to this island. Former advisor to Boris Johnson, Thomas Corbett Dillon, gives a damning indictment of the impact of mass migration to the UK. We'll play a little bit of this clip, but you can find it linked down below, ladies and gentlemen. But here's what Mr. Corbett Dillon had to say.
Really have as many isolated communities. In Birmingham in England, you've got the Muslims that basically just live in there. They all speak the same language. They live in their own little world. You don't really get that in America. When people move to this country, they tend to integrate pretty well. You kind of embrace America. There's not been much embracing of British values among these communities. And I hate this idea that England is just like a no man's land. It's like, no, there is an indigenous population that have lived on that island for thousands of years. And, if this was happening in any other place around the world, everyone would be defending and saying, well, there's a genocide happening in this island because it is being taken over by different people that are not indigenous to that land. And I think that's a sad thing to happen. So I think...
genocide, is that a bit of a harsh word? I mean, white Brits are still the majority in the UK.
Yeah, currently, give it 10 years, give it 20 years. I mean, yes, if this was happening, if there was an island of indigenous people in, the Pacific, and all of a sudden a bunch of white people moved there and were having babies, and the number one name in that country became Tom, all of a sudden the UN would be there and saying, this is outrageous, that's an indigenous island, those people have rights. But doing to England and no one seems to care, I think that's a real shame.
Well, there was some reports.
He has a point. It's exactly why they go on about it in the Middle East with the settlements in the West Bank and whatever else, right? See them as almost like colonial outposts, and that they're genociding and eliminating the native populations in these areas, not always just by violent means of guns and bombs and whatever else, with population bombs as well. Especially when in Western countries, the native birth rate is ever more declining and the migrant birth rate is ever the increasing, which is why they want to appeal to these voting blocks. Because think about it, you have 4 wives and about 4 kids apiece. That's about 16 kids. That's 16 future voters versus the negative voters that are in the natives. So for all the things we go on about traitorous politicians and stuff like that, and there's obviously things to be observed that they're making things deliberately difficult for people to have families and stuff like that. They're deliberately sowing ideologies and thoughts within people that actively hostile to family dynamics. So yeah, there's a case to be made for that, but there's a case to be made for people's individual actions and not viewing the family as sacred, not viewing the bonds between men and women as sacred and all of those things. And, well, can't blame when you let those things go that bad things happen. But there is absolutely, I've referred to it as genocide by replacement. You call it the Great Replacement. Right? Think about it. Would you not call it anything else if all of a sudden the British were breeded out in their homeland and there was no British left anymore anywhere? Would you not call that a genocide? When it was done with intent? right? It was done with intent by people who came to spread the caliphate, for example, with intent by treacherous politicians who wanted to benefit from it up until the point where they had nobody to vote for them because the new Brits, or new Europeans, should we say, as the European Conference, the president of the European Conference of Rabbis said about the people coming in from the Middle East and so on, the new Europeans. He speaks to him that he seems to echo the same, how extreme a lot of these organizations are within Europe, for example, that he seems to be echoing the same sentiment that Itmar Ben-Gvir espouses when he says that we want more Mohammeds in Europe. We want more of these people in Europe and the UK. We want less of them here. Outright saying they want to move these people in because they know the effect that it's going to have. It's going to solve their problems. There's going to be less strife in the Middle East and in their homeland. Maybe then they can even expand their homeland a little bit. But then in terms of Europe, they know it's going to have very, very, very bad consequences for Europe, but they don't care because there's obviously a lot of grievances with regards to the European people on the parts of these people. That's what we see when it comes to a genocide in Europe and in the UK, for example. A lot of these people then come out and then they come out conveniently with the genocide denial. But if you do the same for genocides throughout the 20th century, namely the Holocaust, for example, that's tantamount to a crime. It's not tantamount to a crime to deny what's happening to the British people, right? Melanie Phillips was one of the people that went down this line where the native British people are on the road to extinction, right? Being done deliberately by both people coming in from outside and a treasonous political class. And she sees no problem with it. In fact, she sees the use of genocide as a grotesque misuse of the word, and it's not confined to left-wing Israel-hating morons. As you can imagine, this sentiment got her a lot of pushback. And in my opinion, rightfully so. Connor Tomlinson in the comments saying, if Jews endured rapid, unprecedented, unwanted demographic and cultural change in Israel to the point where they risk becoming a minority in their homeland, obviously then the logical endpoint for that would be elimination. Would this be considered genocidal? If so, why is it any different when it happens to the English? Paul Weston in the comments saying genocide means more than simple mass slaughter. Within just 2 decades, the English will no longer exist as a unique people living in a distinct country. 2026 marks the first year when native births drop to 50-50 with non-native births. It's projected to drop to 25-75 in favour of non-native births by 2040. Our children are already minorities in most of our cities and will become the outright minority across the entire country within 2 decades. Of the only 50% non-native births, Islam makes up the overwhelming majority. Ergo, England/Britain will become Islamic. The UN definition of genocide does actually cover what's happening to us, quote unquote, in whole or in part. You should be utterly ashamed of yourself. Some of that saying in the comments, make Israel diverse, mass immigration for Israel. Obviously, they don't want that, but they want the stifling of any kind of nationalist initiatives coming up in Britain and in Europe, because it's going to be counter to their goals, seemingly, of trying to ship their enemies, their historic religious enemies, off onto us, which is not what a friend does, which is why I can't see the state of Israel, at least in terms of its government, as an ally in any way, shape or form at this present moment in time. And especially when you consider the history between these two lands and when we had the mandate and stuff like that, and that there were terror attacks coming from Israel, the Israelis, well, the Jews, there were terror attacks coming from the Arabs at that time as well. None of these people like us, and so we should just stay the out of it and let, for lack of a better term, let sand people be sand people, and do whatever they're going to do. So, she said that goes to show that the misuse of the word genocide is not confined to left-wing Israel-hating morons. And Hugh Anthony actually responded with a screenshot from Melanie Phillips saying, Melanie, why do you pretend to be white when you are in fact Jewish and then downplay white genocide? You don't get to dismiss the genocide against the white people. You are not one of us, you subversive freak. So strong words from Mr. Anthony. And this is the post in question. He says, she says, I spoke at the debate. I am white and middle class, therefore I display white middle class privilege, and therefore I am not entitled to speak about Western indifference to the plight of women in the developing world. And you think this is an intelligent point. So you're making the point here that the Jewish ethnicity is distinct from the ethnicities of many of the populations in Europe who would be described as white, the British peoples, the indigenous British peoples being one of them. Even if the melanin content in Melanie seems to be fairly similar. And she said, "Love it. I'm not white or even white." So one of them was capitalized, one of them was not. "Who knew? Can I now identify as a victim of oppression?" Simply pointing fun and pointing and laughing at the plight of British people, or at least mocking the sentiment that she's not white, apparently. Many people then in the comments, Steve Law saying, "Now, can I now identify as a victim of oppression? You're Jewish. That's all your people have ever done. Nobody is buying it." But the other thing is, there was a video that my guest coming on the show next week posted, Sam Melia, and you can see how their own words kind of undo this sentiment, where in one breath they say they're white, or they say they're part of the white peoples and whatever else, but they outright say, in words to the effect of, that they are foreign and their allegiance, if they're Jewish, has to be to a foreign state. This is Melanie's own words, ladies and gentlemen. Does this sound like someone who's really going to be good for us and understand the plight of native Britons? Ask yourself after you listen to this.
To fight, you need to know and love your identity. Israel gets it. Now, diaspora Jews need also to realize you are not just Americans with Judaism added on. In Britain, they're not just British Jews with Judaism added on. They are part of the British people, you are part of the Jewish people and the Jewish nation, and that should come first. First and foremost, you are Jews. Everything else is secondary. To fight, you need...
Oh dear. Oh dear. So you see, the problem now is when white people or when Europeans want to come up and do the same. Ethno-state for Israel, diversity for Europe and the Western world. That's the way that many of these people see it. And that's a sad reality. As I said, the president of the European Conference of Rabbis speaks for a lot of people. He speaks for an entire set of religious institutions and, environments. And obviously then, by extension, for all of the adherents of that religion and the people that go to these services, the people that attend these places and so on. Right? The president of the European Conference of Rabbis is not just a nobody. Right? His word carries weight. The things that he says are going to disseminate down through the people that report up to him and the people below him, and that's going to make their way down into the synagogues and into the teachings, into their sermons, if they had their sermons and whatever else, and so on. So we have to take this seriously. You're seeing the double standard here, which is why many of these people who are ardent Zionists get up in arms when the very same talking points that are being applied to Britain and Europe and the Western world are being applied to Israel. You're seeing a very big double standard there. That they can have, an ethno-state and very high ethnic homogeneity, why can't Britain? Why can't Europe? Why can't France, Germany, all of these other places? The Mohammeds need to go somewhere, don't they? So these people don't want the Mohammeds being sent back to the Middle East because it might spell serious problems for them. But that's their problem. That's not the British people's problem. It never ever should have been the British people's problem. But you're seeing here that even British Jews, she mentioned, you're not British first, you're Jewish first, and your allegiance is to the Jewish state first. So are you British or are you not? You can't then, again, claim to be one of the British people and then draw these own lines of distinction that you yourself have drawn. Makes absolutely no sense. So when people think like this, ladies and gentlemen, it makes it quite easy to see, to understand why when you mention the genocide of the native British people, that the same sentiment isn't exactly there as when they talk about the Holocaust or when they talk about October 7th, or any of the other things that Israel, the state of Israel, has been involved in since its inception. Their allegiances are to there. At least in Melanie's case, anyway. They don't complain about rises in quote-unquote anti-Semitism, all of the hate messages that you get, all of these things, and how oppressive it is when you deny a genocide of an indigenous people that's going on now, a takeover of a land that is not of these peoples that are coming in, and you say that the entire ethnic replacement and elimination of those people just being slowly happening for generations now, concertedly, as part of a concerted effort to eliminate those people, commit treason against them. That's not a genocide. Then how dare anybody exercise any kind of speculation over events of the 20th century and even events of the 21st century with October the 7th, and not even just the actual things that happened, but potentially Israeli government knowing about it and choosing not to do anything about it for political utility. Like I said, these people, especially it seems that on the right in Israel, they hawk for wars and they hawk for the displacement of Arabs and Muslims and so on. You know, they are very much so, Jewish supremacists, which, okay, you can be that. You know, you can be your people first, absolutely. And then they want to send all of the Mohammeds away to Europe, and then you have almost like the left-wingers that get into this place and want to open the borders and prevent any kind of nationalist initiatives in these countries and pave the way for these Mohammeds and for these Imrans and for whatever else to come in because it's advantageous to them. Oh dear. We have a problem here, don't we? Maybe the talk of Jewish lobby groups and troublesome influences is not so crackpot after all. And in some instances, ladies and gentlemen, they really just do not do themselves any favours. In what we may term as an isolated incident. I think Sam Elliott called them the biggest crybabies, cry bullies of history. Sorry, not crybabies, cry bullies of history. You have clips like this, which is from Nice in France. A Jewish man, presenting as a Jewish man anyway, squaring off with a group of pro-Palestine protesters, which you can make the argument both of them need to be removed from France if you really wanted to. It's just a bizarre interaction. You have a man accosting this group led by Rima Hassan, which is the woman we talked about before who was feigning ignorance when it came to the murder of Quentin, right, who was defending the women's identitarian group Collective Nemesis, right? She was pictured posing with the terrorist group despite claiming that she had no affiliation with them. So a Jewish man in France now confronted these pro-Palestinian demonstrators led by her, and when the police turn up, maybe somebody made a call that there's potential that this event could get out of hand or whatever, he quite obviously tries to feign as though one of the members have attacked him, despite seemingly none of them making contact with him. And I hate having to defend these people, but I hate having to, give these people credit. But at the end of the day, this guy tried to pass themselves off as they did some kind of crime, when it's quite clear from the video footage that they did not. Here's that video coming on screen for you now.
Agresseur! Agresseur! Oui, il est un agresseur! Qui? Vous agressez tout le monde! Vous agressez malade! Malade! Vous êtes des malades! Vous êtes que des malades! Vous êtes que des malades! Vous êtes malades!
I do apologize. I can't find one without the slowdown. I was trying to find so hard a video with the without the slowdown. But you see here, if I bring it back, he goes over and starts again. All of the notion that he was ever hurt now is gone. He's not even, I believe he was clutching his arm before it's gone. So he gets here and must see the police or something. And the next thing you know, nobody makes contact with him, and he lunges back like he's just had a big electric shock, as if this guy has full on gone unlimited power, like that's friggin' the Emperor or something, you know, in to Mace Windu in the prequels. And he looks like he's holding, you know, I'll bring it back one more time. It looks like he's holding his arm as he's trying to make it seem as though there's this big heinous attack that's happened, or somebody's drawn a weapon on him or something. And he's quite clearly trying to give off the impression that he's hurt, conveniently right as the police show up. I'm like, come on. Things like this, again, it's just one guy. It's just one guy. But there's, as I've noticed, there's a pattern emerging. I can see patterns. And when I see especially high-up figures now, like the European Conference of Rabbis president, saying that, you know, these people need to unite with Muslims against the natives. And then you see things like this. How many more examples now seemingly do we need to see of both sides, right? Of both things, right? Problems in this instance with individuals or relatively high-profile people within the Jewish community, Jewish thought leaders that speak for a lot of the religious leaders within their institutions, etc., that we have to take seriously. And the same goes for the Muslims, obviously. Same goes for the Muslims, especially in Britain. Especially in Britain, where now, as we'll finish off today, you have things like this. Public drawings could now be deemed as blasphemous under Islamic law. Labour Council tell schools. So that's where we are getting to in the UK now. So I hate how invasive the ads are on these websites, on like the Daily Mail and stuff like that. So it's a headline from the Mail. Public drawings can now be blasphemous under Islamic law. Labour Council tells schools while music and dance classes may go against the teachings of Islam. Children's drawings could be considered blasphemous while music and dance lessons could contravene the teachings of Islam, councils have warned schools. The guidance has been issued to teachers across the north of England as part of a publication to highlight sensitivity and awareness around faiths and beliefs. Unless, obviously, they're non-Islamic faiths and beliefs, in which case you also have to be second-rate to Islamic faiths and beliefs in this country, because now we have entire school districts, entire communities that are completely dominated by foreigners of this religion. In many instances, the children that have now been made minorities, the white British children who have now been made minorities in these districts, they now have to go along with this, even though the local council don't care if they're Christian or if they're anything else, right? Because they don't want to upset a bloc that they know can get violent. Sharing the journey has been designed to help schools demonstrate a sensitive and a positive approach to religious and cultural diversity to pupils, parents and carers. Again, getting the children while they're young, whilst they have no defences to these things. Schools still want to be flexible in catering for religious differences, unless it's a case of now, it could be a case of you're drawing, you know, a representation coming up to Good Friday, for example, of Christ's resurrection. You know, you want to do like a poster saying he is risen. Well, that could obviously be taken as culturally and religiously insensitive, couldn't it? The publication cites art as an example, stating that Islamic culture and civilization has a rich artistic tradition, but schools may find there are religious exceptions. A three-dimensional imagery of humans is considered idolatrous by some Muslims. It's very important that the school understands that this is also and is also careful not to ask its students to reproduce images of, exactly as I said, Jesus, Prophet Muhammad, or other figures considered to be prophets in Islam. It's capitulation. It's capitulation seemingly on the altar of tolerance and diversity to just all manner of foreign customs, right? That now people have been convinced that anything resembling a British custom, right, either from its Christian heritage or from its pagan heritage, right, whatever it may be, is to be discarded. And the only things that you can have are these accepted foreign, often religious customs, right, to make things more comfortable for people that should not be here, in most part, at the very least, right, that should not be here, and to actively persecute the native peoples who don't follow these traditions. And now, as I said, targeting their children. And what are children going to do? They're going to go with their teachers. They're going to do whatever the teachers tell them. A really depressing thing. It shouldn't be depressing, but it is in the modern day, that I discussed with Kimberly Isherwood, is how many children believe everything their teachers tell them. So when your teacher's espousing this and they're with your kids 6 to 8 hours a day, it's no surprise you end up coming home with an indoctrinated kid. You know? They should have no place in British society. It's as simple as that. Some Muslim peoples may not wish to draw the human figure. Or if it's in just a basic anatomy lesson and you have an outline of a human, or it's a biology class and they're, you know, labeling parts of the body and the different systems they have within the body, what are you going to do then? What are you going to do? The guidance has been distributed to several schools. And when I went them, why kids are coming out stupider than ever, right? Including within the local authority of Kirklees, whereby Batley Grammar School is located. The teacher who showed an image of the Prophet Muhammad for educational purposes, he's an RS teacher. He's still in hiding because he was threatened with, you know, the Muslims are going to come and kill him and torture him, and probably go after his family as well. A religious studies teacher was suspended and forced into hiding after a furore erupted after he showed pupils a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad. A furore. That's what they described heinous death threats and all manner of other things. You know, typical way the Muslim community operates. In Islam, music is traditionally limited to the human voice and non-tunable percussion instruments as in the days of the Prophet, when they were only used in marriage ceremonies and on the battlefield. As there's a diversity of opinion regarding music amongst Muslims, schools should ensure students are not asked to join in songs that conflict with their religious beliefs. The only way that you can do that then, remember Andrew Goldstein, I should say, said that Michaela School was a microcosm of what he wanted to see in Britain. Again, really laying his hand out more than he intended to, showing that he didn't care about the ethnic placement of Britain. He wanted to see the ethnic replacement of Britain because Michaela School is a heavily ethnic minority school. The only thing is, in order to have that system and to have all of the kids operate under that Michaela banner, you need to have the strictest headmistress in the UK. You need to have the strictest headmistress in the UK in the form of Catherine Birbalsingh. So can you imagine if you extrapolate that out to the rest of society, you need to have the strictest government in play. So basically, ladies and gentlemen, you cannot have freedom, at least in Britain anyway, the British people especially, cannot have freedom with cultural and ethnic diversity. With multiculturalism, there is no freedom. And they say as much. So it needs to end. If you want a society free and prosperous for your kids and grandkids to grow up in, it's time to start acknowledging some uncomfortable truths. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. And that'll do it for today. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for watching, listening. No one said I hope you enjoyed it, because again, not really too much to enjoy, really. But I hope you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you are. Make sure you go over to the members areas. Check your comment under the post for your question for Sam if you want to get one in. If you want to support the show, obviously my link's down below. Greatly appreciate every single one for your support. Thanks so much, ladies and gentlemen. You take care of yourselves now. Hwyl fawr. See you next time. Diolch fawr. Thank you for watching. And you take care of yourselves now. Godspeed.